Welcome to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. I'm your host, Dave Fearon. This conversation with doctoral student Douglas Bellah, Bowling Green State University, doctoral program in organization development and change. All of that leading to the point that he is a very, very nice person. And I think that's who should be the organization development leader, consultant, coach, facilitator of the future. And Doug has committed himself mid-career to the academic aspects of our work so that he can be a scholar practitioner when he finishes this program in another year. But in the context of this conversation, I found resonance, RESONANCE, resonance. This feeling that you're talking with someone and you get it, and hopefully they get you. It's a wonderful feeling that I'm speaking with someone who sees practice the way Peter Vale and I hope that people would see practice, starting with seeing themselves in practice and valuing that and understanding that the more they invest in the continuous improvement of their abilities in that practice, the more satisfying they will be to themselves and to others. So this is the story of Doug Bellah. And when you listen, you'll know why I say that. So here he is. Well, folks, I just met for the first time on camera, and ever for that matter, Doug Bellah. I had been very interested in some of his posts on LinkedIn and recognized that he is a graduate student in the doctoral program on organizational development and change at Bowling Green State University, where I have colleagues who I've met virtually now for the last couple of years in that program, and appreciating and observing that program, like Carol Gorlick, who's been doing an ethnographic study of your program, Doug. And so I was eager to meet you for many reasons, but I was just telling you before we started recording that the idea of showing up for me seems a really key way of indicating whose practice matters a lot. You know, we can have practice that matters somewhat. Like golf matters to me, and it is a practice now. I am a golfer, but you'll never see me in a tournament. But I do show up a lot to play golf. But if you go all the way up through the lexicon of people who are performing all kinds of things in the world, there are some who just bring out what they do, what they care about, what they're learning, and put it out there. And then I would add to that, uninvited or not, invited or not, just there's something about what we want to say. So I'll just stop talking, and I'll give you the next 29 minutes, Doug, to tell us anything you want to say. No, I won't do that. Yes, I love talking, but I also like to listen. So tell what is the short form of your reason to be in this doctoral program? And I would guess mid-career.
Yeah. So first off, Dave, thank you so much for inviting me on to the podcast. Certainly it's an honor and to be here and to learn from you too. So, my reason for the doctoral program starts with, I would consider myself a lifelong learner, but I really didn't recognize that until probably my early 40s. I always characterize my undergraduate years as I was probably more of a student of life than a student of academia. But at work, growing up in the world of retail and leadership, I always continued to learn more from whoever, having great mentors or saying, yeah, I'll, volunteering for the role that I knew I wasn't ready for, but would stretch me. And then and as I turned 40, I was like, okay, there's got to be some more formalized learning process that I'm missing. And so I started actually an executive MBA program at Bowling Green State University.
Okay.
And completed that in a couple of years. And once I got done with that, the program director was Tom Daniels. And I called him up and I said, oh, Tom, I've just completed this MBA, and while it was a great learning experience, I think I made a mistake. I really think I should have gone for the Masters of Organization Development because I really like the people aspect of it. And so I'd like to talk to you about going down that road and getting my master's in OD. And he said, hang on, wait, we're right now, we're working on something. I can't give you the details yet, but there's something out there. And so, of course, curiosity and crypticism kept me in conversation with Tom. And it was a couple months later that they announced the doctoral program in organization development.
Wow.
Yeah. So, so I was like, all right, you know what? Sign me up. And 2019, I entered cohort 1 with cohort 1. And really, it was about understanding the different levels from organization to team to individuals and that whole system and how it, comes together. And all 3 parts of the system need to be working well with each other to make sure that everything, that the whole system is working. So, I started with the cohort 1 in 2019. I did have to take a brief pause. I ended up moving my family across the state of Michigan, taking a new job. And so that created some extra stressors, but then rejoined in cohort 2. So
now the coincidence of you doing what I just said earlier, showing up to Tom, completing the EMBA, which a lot of people say, well, that's good. That's plenty. I'm going to be a business manager leader, as Peter Vail called us. And off I go. I move my family. And like tens of thousands of other very conscientious people, you would help a company go and grow. But there was this feeling you had, what you call the human side of business, that seemed to be, as we say in Maine, stuck in your craw. And had you not acted on that and picked up that phone or however you spoke to Tom, you wouldn't probably have known about the onset of this brand new doctoral program, very, very innovative program. Unless then you would kind of look back in your rear view mirror and say, "Oh, gee, I wish I'd known about that sooner." So that serendipitous concurrence of your desire to grow more learning in a different way and the availability of that program was pretty magical.
Absolutely. And so, and just as fit with the whole experience at BGSU, it's just been an incredible journey. And I would even say being the bridge between cohort 1 and cohort 2 has been a magical part of that journey, being able to bring the 2 groups together that are part of the trailblazers for what's to come. I mean, it's an incredible program that Steve Cady and Francis Baldwin and Carol Gorlick are out there, helping create. So it's been truly an adventure.
What were some of the most impactful experiences you had in that first cohort? 2019 into 2020, we're moving toward the pandemic, but it was the wrapper was taken off, and the very first people to land in that program, like landing at the rock of the Mayflower, and new ground. It had never been done there before. So you were definitely pioneering. What were some of the most impactful experiences that come to mind about that particular cohort year?
So first and foremost was the environment that Steve Cady set up as the program director. So bringing in, at that point, there were 15 of us that from all across the country, coming together at the campus of Bowling Green. And, nobody knew each other. We'd had a couple of Zoom meetings early on just to do introductions, but this first in-person meeting, over the course of 4 days, he created such an incredible bond of trust among the 15 of us that really served us well as we went through, because it's a tough program. I mean, you're going in and you're not only doing some heavy scholarly lit reviews, but you're also, intensive writing, and you need that support. So how he created and such strong bonds of trust among that group of initial 15 was just incredible. And to the point where we could be completely vulnerable with each other, sharing elements that were so personal that we wouldn't normally share out in the business world. But it was so impactful that we all stayed in contact and were each other's cheerleaders. We were each other's people to call to and cry on a shoulder if we needed to, or just say, hey, how am I going to get through this? And that's even continued through today, even switching from cohort 1 to cohort 2. And I would say that same experience, which I would have never thought could be replicated, has been replicated in cohort 2. And we are what I would call our dub as the pandemic baby. So we actually,
had another first,
Yes. Yeah. We actually didn't meet in person until this past April. So that was the first time after almost a year and a half. So, And again, it's the way Steve has been able to create these bonds of trust in both groups is just incredible.
David Jameson, I think you probably had some coursework with him. He also was a good friend of Peter Vale's, and he and Jackie Milbrandt wrote a magnificent chapter that sort of chronicled Peter Vale's life. But another book of work that they did was pioneering in the use of self in practice. It took me a minute to work it all through my head. The use of self in practice, which seems to tie very much into what Steve and others wanted you all to be able to do by opening up so much of yourself to each other and getting that kind of scary stuff out of the way and recognizing it's going to be you. It is you as you return to any part of the real world, who first and foremost is going to have the impact. I think of Frances Baldwin, for example, who I've only seen and met on Zoom, but she comes across to me someone who just is a natural in terms of being herself in a powerful way. What's your experience of being yourself now that you've been through, almost 3 years of this experience?
So, yeah, that's a great question. And it is, as I now see how I show up at work and my full-time job, or even for my family for that matter, and understanding how being able to, one, admit that we've all had mistakes and it's okay, and they're learning moments and framing them as such. That's definitely one way I'm showing up differently. And I was always comfortable with saying, hey, I made a mistake, but I don't know that I would have broadcasted it from the rooftops. I would have been like, oh, yeah, I made a mistake. Okay, let me go over here. I own it. I'll help correct it. But now helping those that I support and lead understand that, hey, you know what? Yeah, you made a mistake. Great. What did we learn from it? Let's go through this after action review.
There's a process there now.
Yeah. How can we then share this learning with others so that they can build on it? And I even think of my kids, especially, school is so focused on a grade attainment, and your identity is built around A's, B's, and C's. And as I'm telling my kids right now, look, I don't care what grade you get. What I want to know is, what are you learning from it? What are you able to take forward with this? And I get the grades are important to move you through, and I get that part of it. But really, I want you to be able to say, hey, I walked away from this math class, and I started out being able to add 2 + 2, and now I can get into these algorithms or whatever. So, but just helping them understand that, learning is a process, and mistakes are going to be a part of that. Wins are going to be a part of that. So how do we celebrate that? How do we show up and support of each other through those difficult times and through the times where we're winning too. So those are, just ways that I'm looking at life a little differently. Especially,
it's a lot differently in so many. Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm thinking of when a youngster learns to master a bit of mathematics. I almost pictured, as you were saying that you have now given them opportunity to move into another part of the world, if you will, that was screened, the world where people count stuff and move figures around to make new sense of phenomenon. And I would think all the way through to the program you're in right now, it is opening up. I know this sounds cliche, but I believe it. It opens up new aspects of the world to you. Whether you actually walk through a door as a consultant or a coach or whoever, or but remain as a leader where you are in the world right now. Are you noticing more? Are you seeing more? Are you feeling more than you think you might have had you not returned to this to finish this doctorate?
Absolutely. I and it's from the small nuances of body language to just, and just a little bit of a sidestep here, but what I've noticed is I have a strong affinity to a dialogic OD method. So I'm very much interested in where a conversation starts, where it grows, and how it ends. That's not from a diagnostic perspective. So I really take time to notice the language being used, the metaphors that are being used. How do we shift the metaphor from, this is a tough row to hoe. Okay, well, do we have the right hoe? Are we in the right row? What are we even planting a garden right now? What are we talking about here? So, and really and noticing how groups come together and communicate. And again, going back to my family, my kids, it's one of the things I think that was evident for me is that, especially I grew up in a very traditional school setting of rows and teacher knew best and that sort. I also want to help my kids, but others, to begin thinking for themselves and not being me as the person that's the go-to person. Like, what do you think? So I noticed myself asking much deeper questions, much more powerful questions, instead of just being an advisor, truly stepping into a coach mode. And so when someone brings me a problem or a concern, my first question is, well, if you had the right answer, what would it be? And so, and really positioning whoever's coming to me to have that moment to think. And if they have to sit with it, that's okay too. I'm okay with silence and letting people just sit and really do some deep reflection. I don't know that would have been there prior to the program, especially the being comfortable with sitting in complete silence and just letting those that are with me have to think. I would have just wanted to get them an answer quick, help them move forward. And because, in business, we've got to always move quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And what that results in, a less of an ability to think for yourself. So.
Yeah. And a lot of tumbling tripping and tumbling into a change when business is in a rush versus a lot more thoughtful way of moving forward. You just reminded me of the podcast conversation I had 2 weeks ago with Bill Blendell. It's episode 161, I believe. And then when you listen to that, you're going to hear an OD and change professor at Penn State, who, by the way, taught at College of St. Thomas with Dave Jameson. And after Peter had to leave, but there was some wonderful connections that I didn't really know about until I met him through LinkedIn. Anyway, he has found the mindfulness, not just the movement, but the whole arena of where you deeply explore what's in you by not letting yourself think, which I think, oh my God, I've lived in my head for 79 years. How could I possibly quiet my head down? And as he said in one point, the gift that you're offering, to your point, is an emptiness. Like, what? No, you've got to empty yourself. Now, in the various ways that you've been learning, have you come across some of those methodologies, or not really methodologies, ways of being actually, to get you closer to the self aspect of organization change and development, particularly this notion of silence?
So one of the tools I use, and it's journaling. I take a couple of different approaches depending on where my mind space is at. Some days when I need to feel like I've got to be lifted up, I'll do gratitude or affirmation journaling. But there are moments, so when I just need to sit with the silence, that I do a data dump journal, and I just, whatever's in my head, I write it down. And then I step back and I'll go sit for 10 minutes and just focus on breathing and doing a 4-count breathing, or something that's really helps me not think about anything other than just, to your point, the silence. Let's just let it be there in my head. And so that's one element. The other, and this was with Dave Jamieson, it's through his use of self, is I also now take notice of where I feel a trigger, and what is that saying to me? So when I'm either triggered, happiness, anger, sadness, disappointment, and whereas before I would be so quick to move beyond that emotion, now I really focus on, why am I feeling that? Why am I feeling that level of disappointment in someone else? Usually more specifically in someone else, so that I understand what that's bringing up in me, and then I'll journal about that as well. Because it's what I'm finding is that power in the shadow side. How do I harness that? How do I bring that forward again to help others, to help myself, and help others?
No, because you're going to, when you step back into your day at work, or step out to a meeting, a face-to-face meeting of your cohort, or however you position yourself in the day, you're with people. And the triggers are sniffing and snapping all day long, in as you say, the good and the not so good ideas. And so the conditioning, the self-disciplining one has to do to be able to bring that presence out as a paid offering, if you will, is what this amazing field of organization and development chain folks are doing all over the world. And I remember saying, and after one conversation, can't quite remember who it was, but I said, that is to do this work in the pandemic era with all the stuff going on takes tremendous courage. And I think the response was, it takes tremendous compassion. And it does allow you, therefore, to be encouraging, which is different than, hey, I'm here to save the day, the Mighty Mouse approach to organization consulting. Peter once, I had an opportunity years back, maybe 5 or so years after I was his student, and I was asked if I would do something like organization consulting, just a few days. But I remember calling Peter, and I said, what do I do? I mean, I can handle a classroom, but I've never quite gone out to, in quotes, troubleshoot an organization. And I remember something like, first thing Peter says, well, if you're there to shoot trouble, don't go. And I said, what do you mean? He said, because that's an attitude that you'll bring in. I'm here to look at the trouble. Why don't you first think about how, to your earlier point, how good would it be if by the end of this time together, we're all feeling a lot less troubled. I like that. But he said and he had this in the book too. He said, I reached out once to a very successful organization development person, and he said, well, what do I do? Says Peter. And the person said, hate the system and love the people. Like I shook my head, but I still remember that to this day. Hate the system and love the people. And I said, wait a minute. I mean, I'm a sociologist. I mean, systems are everywhere. We study, we write, we talk system. He said, no, but recognize, similar to what Deming did years ago, saying it's almost always a system that causes the failure. And so if you think you love the system more than the people, you're taking your eye on and placing it in the wrong ball, if you will. What's your I'm rambling here, but I wonder what you think of that notion of hate the system and love the people.
So what it brings forward for me as I was hearing you is it really is that focus of connection over content or connection over context. And Jervis Bush and Bob Marshak and their dialogic teachings, that's one of the points that they emphasize that's really stood out to me, is we first have to know each other before we can move forward and know each other beyond I'm an HR director at said company.
Yeah.
And that's when I think about where my interests are from a learning perspective, it really is around that storytelling element, but in that a holistic introduction of, typically when I introduce myself, somebody will say, what do you do? And I'll say, well, first and foremost, I'm a husband and father of 4 kids. Mm-hmm. And that's then I go into as a doctoral student and I work at, I help people at an organization. And so instead of giving a title, it's really like, who are you? I want to know who you are. And so it's that connection, because then that, to your point, helps you support loving that person. We can create that empathy and that compassion because I know you beyond just the title that's sitting before me. Yeah. And that's really for what that brings forward for me is, how do you love the people that are here in the system and know that the system is flawed, and we'll help figure that out too. But really it's the people that make it work. So.
And the system is what gave them that title, put them in that hierarchy, sends them and sometimes down blind alleys and so forth, because it's not always the intention of the collective that the system does those things. It's the system is all the elements working, and sometimes working well together and sometimes not. But it's almost like the weather compared to if you and I were standing outside here in Connecticut talking, we'd both look at the sky and say, yep, just as predicted, there's going to be some rain a little later. The trees are starting to move. Well, that's the system. I don't hate the weather, but I would if I were planning an outing tonight, and I go, I curse the weather. But if you're loving the people, then you're saying, well, I'll tell you what, since we can't do this outside, let's take the whole picnic and put it on the screen porch and we'll have our picnic there. That notion of we can keep going together because we want to be together. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to let forces that are essentially beyond our control to make that not happen well. In the last few minutes, one thing, I love the podcasting, but I do have to watch my time budget. And there's so much more I want to explore with you, Doug. Let's make then where you want to be showing up 5 years from now as the last thing to talk about. A very simple, where do you want to be in 5 years? No, but where do you want to be showing up in 5 years?
So that is a great question.
As Dr. Bellah, by the way.
Yes. I want to show up as someone who helps others bring forward their voice in an inclusive manner. And it could be, I'm going to say within the setting of a meeting, but I consider a meeting to be not just a meeting, could be in an educational, grade 8. It could also be in a business. It could be in a community. But how do we create a stronger method for when people come together, that they connect, they feel heard, and feel like they are a part of positive change?
Wow.
It's so important, and part of that's personally driven. I've been the person that sat in the meeting that's so quiet and afraid to bring my ideas forward because I thought they would be, laughed at, or it wasn't the right. I always was like, oh, this isn't the right place or the right time. And what I've found, and an experience and a lot through this program, is that we all need to be comfortable with sharing our voice. We all have great things that we can bring forward that can be that igniter for the next great idea, that, from a collaborative perspective. So yeah, it's important for me to find a methodology or help as many people feel psychologically safe so that they can contribute to in a greater way and to lean into whatever they feel like their purpose or potential is. So,
I love that, and I will try my best to live long enough to see you in 5 years and ask how that's going. And I'm pretty sure it's going well. It gave me a lot of thought while I was listening, and I was listening, because what I was doing in my active listening was looking at our earphones. And I was thinking metaphorically that and our mics, what I hear you doing for anyone in any grouping that you are part of and about which you care, you're essentially putting earphones and microphones on everyone, which says we're all listening, and everyone has a microphone, and they're all on all the time. Now take those off, and now let's keep talking. Let's keep listening. Because I've really had the challenge of not speaking up, but I also have family members who are quite shy, and I've always known that they're in many cases are much, much more alert and smart than I am about a particular matter at hand, and they just don't say it. And afterwards they say, oh, I wish I had said something. So you and I are on the same wavelength. I think the more we can find ways with people to get over first their own cancellation of their voice, which is very much inside, and that's the safety and the invitingness, but also the listening part, to teach the non-listeners or the partial listeners or the however you want to characterize people who structurally think they shouldn't be listening because of their status in an organization. If that can be somewhat changed as well, man, we'd be in a better world in a few years, Doug.
Yes, I wholeheartedly believe that. Yes, being able to hold space for other opinions and thoughts that are different than our own. Yes, we've got to get there. It's imperative.
Well, damn it, let's do it.
Yes, yes.
This has been delightful. I can't thank you. I will thank you and thank you. And then maybe other ways that we'll reconnect. I'm pretty sure I might show up in one of the Zoom meetings that Steve Cady has been offering, and maybe I'll see you in a square.
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
I don't think I'll get to Ohio ever or Michigan, but this is great, and this is a great way to become acquainted. So thank you, Doug Bellah. Doug Bellah. Watch that name, folks.
Oh, thank you so much.
He's rising.
Oh, thank you, Dave. I really appreciate the time and just the conversation. Yeah, let's keep talking. I love it. This is good stuff.
If you'd like to hear more, listen in on Spotify, Automatic, and Apple Podcasts or go to inactionresearch.com/podcast-page. And if you'd like to learn more about social inaction and the nature of practice, head over to inactionresearch.com for more information. Thank you for supporting this show. We look forward to hearing from you soon.